Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael and I'm trying to use forced perspective to give the illusion of a commercial backstreet disappearing behind my Victorian city hotel. In the last episode, I showed how I used cereal box card to mock up the shapes of the building in this tiny space behind the hotel's tower. Let's dive straight into this episode and look at how I'm getting on turning the mock-up into the real thing. I split the mock-up into individual shapes and arranged them on an A4 sheet of sticky label, which I stuck to a sheet of 1mm thick grey board. I used a scalpel to cut out the openings for the doors and windows on the straight face of the building. I started to cut the openings on the perspective face. These windows at the end are only 2.1mm wide. I decided that to cut these from 1mm card was unrealistic and would lead to walls that appeared too thick. I therefore abandoned this and concentrated on the flat face first. This is a low relief building and is only 20mm deep. I cut supports out of 1mm card and used PVA glue to attach them to the back of the flat face. I used the rectangles from the windows as little pre-made 90-degree supports. I'm left with a sturdy base for the main part of the building. Now back to the perspective bit. This time I stuck the components to 0.5mm card. I'm using two layers. One has the windows and one has a large hole around where the windows will be. I cut these out first, and then I did the 20 tiny windows. I had to take care here as this bit of wall is only 1.4mm wide. I used PVA to glue the two layers together, and then weighed them down with a heavy book so that it dried dead flat. The mock-up has a rectangular gap to fit around the base of the tower. I used this as a guide to remove the same shape from the real thing, before gluing triangular pieces to support the wall at the correct angle for the model. Once these were in place, it was a simple case of gluing the side to the front using PVA, and holding them in place with tape, whilst the glue set. I am using Scale Scene's brick texture to give a contrast to the hotel. For the perspective effect to work, I needed to get the bricks receding towards the same vanishing point that I'd used for the main building. Inkscape cannot skew or distort bitmap graphics, so I needed to do something different. I used Inkscape to fill the original wall with the texture, which I then exported as a simple rectangle image. I also exported the perspective trapezoid as a simple line drawing. I imported both into layers in the free online tool Photopia. It was then a simple case of dragging the corners of the bricks until they matched the trapezoid guide. I saved this and re-imported it into Inkscape, and I was amazed and very happy that the bricks joined up almost perfectly. With this printed out and resting on the base, it was already clear that this was going to look great. I always use PVA to glue the cover layers to the part-built building. I add glue around the windows and doors first, and then use a wavy line to cover the surface lightly. Too much glue and things may warp, but not enough and we may get bubbles when we varnish the completed model. I carefully align the texture with the model and smooth it down with my fingertips. All that remains is to cut slits in the window apertures and tightly fold the resulting flaps around to represent the edges of the brickwork around the windows. You know what, I think this may just work. There are 18 visible windows and doors on the perspective wall, and for the effect to be convincing, they all need to be created to the same perspective. I created the shapes for the sills and lintels in the same way as I usually do, just by using rectangles. With these in place, I transformed the wall again via the Inkscape perspective tool. I'm left with individual shapes for each window. I apply a stone texture to these and print them out. These are absolutely tiny, but all I need to do now is cut them individually and apply to each window. With 57 tiny shapes to cut, glue and fold, this took quite a while. I used the exact same method to create the window frames. I printed the frames with the correct perspective onto sticky label. I then used the sticky label method to make the frames. This means sticking the frame to acetate, crisscrossing the frame with a scalpel, and then peeling out the apertures. These windows are tiny. Once applied and cut, I cut the whole window from the acetate, and then glue into place. The windows follow the perspective of the building, and this helps tie the whole effect together. I used the same perspective techniques in Inkscape to create an air conditioning duct, business name sign, and a ledge for the top of the wall. For thin elements like these, I glue the paper in layers using a glue stick. Once the elements are several layers of paper deep and the glue has dried, I cut them out and simply glue into place. The name sign is a thank you to John Warner at Piccadilly N-Gauge Model Railway, who took time to discuss forced perspective with me this week. Thanks, John. If you've not seen his amazing N-scale model of Manchester Piccadilly, there's a link to his channel in the description of this video. The roof was simple to make. I tiled a basic rectangle in strips of Scale Scene's slate roof tiles. The perspective bit of roof was a challenge. The roof is getting smaller as it goes into the distance, but the street is also moving backwards and into the back scene. This results in an odd shape that won't ever look perfect from all angles. It does look a little bit like a hipped roof though, so I hope it doesn't look too bad. I used the interpolate feature in Inkscape to add guidelines which followed the perspective of the roof. I used these guidelines to add strips of tiles which, although not diminishing in size, at least followed the lines of the perspective. I used the sticky label method to add skylights in the roof. Coloured the exposed card edge with a grey pen. Stuck the roof to the base with PVA and held it in place with small clamps whilst the glue dried. I added simple downspouts by colouring the edge of some thin card with a black marker, cutting off a tiny sliver and dropping onto a thin bead of glue on the wall. I added one coat of matte varnish to begin the process of removing the glue marks on the wall. I hope Paul Sheedy is enjoying this episode. As a new Chandwell Tour Guide channel member, Paul gets access to the video a couple of days early as my way of saying thank you for supporting my channel. Details of how to support Chandwell are in the description. Hello and thank you to all of my channel members. So what do you think of this building now it's moving away from just being a mock-up? Do you think I'm on the right lines? Please let me know in the comments. If you're interested in the sticky label method for windows, this video will help. I'm going to finish off this building next, add some flat buildings in the distance, and see if I can get it all embedded into the landscape of Chandwell. So until then, thank you for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.